Welcome to Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast where we showcase stories, celebrate successes, and shift culture. Welcome to another episode of Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast. I am your host, Patti Cook, and I am joined today with Heather MacDonald, Principal Consultant with Pluralsight. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
Always fun to chat with you.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about Pluralsight. It's in multiple countries. It's got thousands of employees. Tell us a little bit about your role there and something like about you that we might not know. Favorite book, favorite podcast, whatever that might be. I know.
I love so many podcasts and so many books.
Okay.
So working for Pluralsight, they are a tech skills development company. So we work with global companies all around the world to help upskill their tech talent. So whether it's upskilling existing technical employees or supporting employees that want to become technical, gaining those skills in a way that they can do either on their own or through organized programs that the company provides for them. But Pluralsight is that tool that helps them get there. So my role specifically with them, though, is working with a lot of these larger enterprise companies to figure out, like, where does Pluralsight fit within your bigger learning and development strategies? Okay. And then where does that align to your business strategy? So making sure that, like, everything kind of connects together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We get that. I'm sensing this aligns with how WLI does things.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So making sure it all comes together, making sure that people can get access to the information that they need, and making sure that when companies are thinking about this, they're thinking strategically about where this fits. So it's not just, here's a tool, good luck, and I hope it, supports your career. It's like, here's exactly what we're looking for. If you want to sustain your career here with us, there is a path forward for you.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Which is really exciting for them.
Yes.
I guess something that people might not know about me, I actually have my M-Class license, so I can drive a motorcycle if I want to.
Oh.
I am also, like, traffic around here is terrible, so I have not rode for a very long time, but it's one of those weird fun facts.
Okay, motorcycles.
Yes.
I love it. Like Harley or like bullet bikes or what? What are we talking?
My husband had some kind of fancy bike for a little while, and I just rode the very small other one that we had around. Ended up getting rid of those when we moved anyway. But yeah, it's been a while. I settle for like a regular car now.
Hey, that's okay. It's okay, but that's a fun fact. I love it.
Yes.
Often it comes up in here. I love that you talked about pathways and that there's a path for the career. If you want to continue with us, this is how you do it. That's very transparent. Not all companies are like that. We run up against that when we help women develop and then they want to be promoted, and there's not always a pathway for that. So let's talk a little bit about change management within a company, how they actually implement it. What are the barriers to change? What are some success stories you've had?
Change management is one of the biggest things that we're like, hold on, like, you can have a great tool, you can have great programs, but if you're not thinking about the change strategy with it, you're almost asking yourself to fail, which is terrible for the people creating the programs, for the people trying to get through them.
Right. Because both those components could be great.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You could have a perfect tool that does literally everything under the sun. You can have a great program that is super clear, that gets you to the outcomes you're looking for, that gives you all of the skills you need. But if you're not thinking about how does this fit within our larger ecosystem, or some people call it their operating model, like, how do we consider the people in it? Okay. How do we consider the communications that need to go across all of these levels? So, because you're never just talking about like the learner themselves.
Right.
It's their managers, it's their managers, it's the business strategy. What does my day-to-day look like? It's all of these components that come together to see like, will this actually fit? And will I see enough value in it to like trust in it and pursue that path for myself? Part of it is also like, especially big enterprises, they're complex. There's so many layers. So does HR understand the same thing that learning and development does, that our tech managers do, and that our people do? And oftentimes people are operating in these silos and again, wondering, why is nothing working?
Right.
Got to bring the people
together. And they
together.
don't always talk to each other.
Yes. Even if they mean to, even if they have the best intentions, sometimes it's just, it doesn't happen. Or everyone has a stake in it, so nobody wants to be the accountable person for it because they know they've got to bring so many people along.
Yep.
So I think the biggest challenge around change management, it's the people element of it.
People, we get in our own way,
people. Yes.
Well, is it because I think maybe you said it's both on purpose because they don't want to take accountability, and maybe not on purpose because they don't know or are unsure about it? What does that look like? What are those?
Yeah. Sometimes it's you're so overwhelmed because this is probably just one component of your job. So when you have multiple priorities, it's really hard to say, I'm going to take charge of this and try to wrangle my peers in and get this
Yeah.
work done.
Yep.
So sometimes it's just, it feels overwhelming to try to do that. Other times is when we've looked at where we place these roles in the hierarchy of our organization. Sometimes we don't put them in a place that gives them actual formal authority to get the work done.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying.
Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You women out there know what I'm saying too.
I know. All of you. We're like, you know. So it's really hard when you're saying, oh, do this big transformational change, but you're somebody over here, like off to the
Who
side.
doesn't have the authority to do, or the support, or the finances, or any of that to do it.
Exactly. Like figure it out on a shoestring. And by the way, you can't do anything. You can't bother anybody else. You can't ask for any more support.
Right.
And then we also won't give you information. That's the other biggest hurdle I see, is that people won't give you the information to effectively do your job. So you might be sitting there in learning and development saying, okay, I've got to figure out this learning strategy because there's these tech skills we need that we don't have.
Okay.
But then you're over here like, okay, well, what is HR doing? And how do I not overstep my bounds? How do I maximize the information they have?
Yep.
Yes, do not duplicate efforts. But then also, like, what does tech leadership want? Do I have the actual information and insights that I need from them? How do I also understand, like, which parts of the organization need to be upskilled first? Sometimes you're just given like a upskill our people, make sure they understand cloud, make sure they understand generative AI. And you're like, okay, well, our tech org, sometimes your tech org is 2,000 people, sometimes it's 20,000 people. And you're going, like, who needs what when? How do I scaffold this in? Again, how do I get buy-in and support for this?
Right.
And if you don't have enough information to actually figure out what your strategy needs to look like, where do you pilot first? How do you scale it and sustain it? Again, you're just shooting in the dark and hoping that you manage to get some sort of a win that doesn't disappoint people at the end of the day.
And some companies, that's okay because they've checked it. They're like, hey, we have this program, even though it's not set up for actual sustainable success.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that sometimes it just feels better to have something in place than nothing in place.
Yeah.
And I think the thing too is when people think about change, they're like, but I want it now. Transformational change by nature is over time.
Yes.
Yeah, we like to tell people it's like an evolution. Like, it's not just turning on a switch and all of a sudden everyone's tech literate and everyone's tech savvy and everyone knows all the things that they need to do their job. It's often actually the systems level changes that have to occur alongside the training to actually make it work. So you could say, we're going to the cloud. Okay, super exciting. Here's some training. Okay, that's great. But the way that you operate like on-prem with your engineering and your processes now is not the same as how you would operate in the cloud. So it's not just a technical knowledge gap, but it's also a systems gap of how do we actually shift our way of thinking and being to one that works in this different environment? And how do we make sure all of the other systems and processes around that align for us to be successful? And often there is no one person who owns all of that. So it's a big bringing people together, getting consensus and driving that change forward together.
So that's so interesting because all companies, as you're talking, I'm thinking of all the companies I've worked for, including the Women's Leadership Institute. Like, this is a process in all of them.
Yes.
Do you find that when the leader, the CEO, co-founder, someone at that level has buy-in and brings everybody together instead of you having to bring everybody together, that it's implemented better or has longer staying power? Is that just vision that's transmitted, accountability? What does that look like?
Often if you have the highest level buy-in, so if your C-suite is bought in because they all understand, they agree that this is a business imperative, not just like a learning imperative, or, the tech org cares about this, but nobody else does. When they agree at the highest level between them and the board, whoever's involved, this is our priority, then you can actually start to get down and say, okay, how do we make sure this is communicated effectively and ongoing? So it's that thing, I think you have to hear something like 7 or 9 times, before it starts to register. So the thing is, until you're communicating so often that you're sick of hearing yourself, nobody's hearing your message. And we've tested this out. So like when we've done this before, we will work through, the top layer. Your CTO, CIO is communicating down in their written communications, in their, town hall meetings and everything, saying, this is important. We are a learning culture. This is where we're going. Then you've got to work with that senior level of leadership. They need to start helping prioritize
their managers,
for their managers. And then your management level needs training and enablement to support them, because sometimes you got to be a manager because you're great at what you do.
But you're not a good manager.
Yes, you don't necessarily have the skills. And we've seen so often, you probably see this all the time with the companies, is you don't get formal leadership training until you're a senior leader. In which case it's like, well, there's a whole bunch of people reporting to you now.
Yes.
Who knows what that's looking like? So making sure that middle level of management is enabled and supported to say, okay, here's what's coming. Here's what you need to know. So like when we've done it before, it's like a monthly newsletter or a quarterly newsletter saying, here's what we're focusing on. Here's what to do. Here's the talking points to discuss this with your people. Because again, you can't assume that everyone knows how to have a development discussion. So if you make sure it's clear for somebody, assuming that they know nothing about this, then the people who do can skim it, go, I got it. I'm running with it in my one-to-ones and it's not a big deal. But we see the best results when it's, top down, but also when you're taking advantage of that bottom up and kind of middle out or in. You've got to find the people who are super excited about the change and who want to be a part of it. Never sleep on the people who are like jumping in first. They're loving it. They're the early adopters. Like, ask them for their opinion. Ask them for their feedback. Ask them who else should be at the table.
Because they're also going to be influencers.
Exactly.
Yeah, early adopters are usually influencers as well.
Yeah, plus like, you know how it is. The message from the top down gets diluted every level it comes down through your org. So if you've got somebody over here that's like, no, you got to get in on this, man. It's really good for us. I've seen some good results.
Yes, at every level, helping support. I love that. Wow, you've said so many things. The first is I'm a big believer that communication creates reality. And oftentimes what I have seen happen is the CEO or the board gets so excited about a vision and they spend a lot of time on it. And then it's like a memo to the manager.
Yes.
So we go from them understanding and having all this discussion and information about it, but the vision isn't translated down the line so that everyone can catch it and implement it. So even if it's a really good thing, I think that communication component and repetition and tell me like I'm a fifth grader.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So important. Really great steps.
Yeah. It's like, I always tell people clarity is kindness. Like if you can't be clear whether it's good or bad news, people aren't going to get it. They're just going to be like,
was that bad for me? I'm not sure what happened.
Well, and that's the thing with learning programs. You're like, is this bad? Am I not doing a good job? Am I
is that why you're putting me in the program?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you explain it to them, how this benefits you, what this means to your long-term growth and development here, people want to feel invested in and that they're part of this change, not that this is a change happening to them for reasons unknown to them.
Because then psychologically we'll buck, right? We'll buck against that.
Yes, exactly. And especially when people are already worried about layoffs, they're already worried about the economic conditions, they're already hearing that people are having such a hard time finding another job. The problem is if you don't do this really well in the communication piece, your best people get spooked and they leave and you're without them. And then you're stuck with either people who don't feel they have a better option or the people who are literally just here pushing the button, waiting for their check. So it's like if you want to make sure, the buy-in is gone. The people who you really wanted to stay have left. Everyone else is either operating out of space of fear for their jobs, or they're the people who are like, I'm just trying to get by on the least amount of effort. And it's
the
like
quiet quitters, right?
Exactly. You're never going to transform your organization when you're dealing with people who are either terrified for their job every single day, or they're just quiet quitting and hanging on for dear life.
Yes. And we all have our different seasons, but I think this conversation about change management is so imperative, especially the work that we do with helping. I think the statistic is 95% of Utah CEOs are men, and 74% of the legislature is men. And I'm not saying they're doing a bad job. I think most of them are doing a really good job. But creating that change in the system, in the communication, creating space is really the work that we're doing. So understanding elements of change management for all of us, I think is really important.
Totally. Well, and everything right now is change, whether it's, your workforce that needs to change, whether it's a technology transformation to either a tech tool or to the cloud, or how do you integrate generative AI in the work that you're doing? Do you integrate it into the work that you're doing? Or if it's things that are just like the ongoing things that just happen to us, COVID hits, what's the next thing that's going to hit that's going to be super disruptive to us? There is no more level of like, let's just keep doing what we've been doing. I think most people can see that that's not working anymore. Like what worked, back in,
or that's going to drive you into the ground if you don't adapt and pivot. And
it's a risk right now. And honestly, like boards need to be looking at their leadership team to decide, like, are your leaders prepared to lead through whatever is coming next? If they are very hard fixed on like, we have to just do it the same way we've always done it, you might want to understand maybe they need some enablement and training and support to understand how do we start to look at perspectives beyond our own? How do we start, like you said, if we've
lean in with the curiosity part.
And if we've got 95% men who are running these organizations, how do you make sure you're not missing the voices of people with disabilities, women, people of color, refugees, like so much of our economy is going global. And if you are not having those voices at the table, you are missing the opportunity to do better by your customers and for yourself.
Yeah. Well, even the idea that women do 86% of the consumer buying.
Right.
You want someone on your product team, your design team, communication, all the things, right? So that you can understand your demographics.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, it reminds me of the example of BlackBerry, right?
Yep.
He thought that he could not go down because BlackBerry was so popular. And then this guy named Steve Jobs comes out of nowhere. He's like, they're not going to overtake us. But instead of leaning in with curiosity, like they didn't disrupt, they went away, right? Nobody has a BlackBerry.
Yep.
So that's just some really great leadership principles. As we talk about voices at the table, I want to talk to you about often being the only person in the room in many of these discussions. How have you navigated that? Because I feel like you've learned some really good tools to be successful in this. So for those women who are trying to navigate this themselves, what would you offer them?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one of them, lean into your strengths. I think so often the things that make us really great do make us unique. And then we feel like, well, is that just weird? And you think, I need to put that to the side because it doesn't fit the stereotypical, this is what a leader looks like, you know? But often the things that are unique to us are exactly what make us really, really good at what we do. The ability to connect the dots, to build lasting relationships, to connect with people quickly and effectively, to be able to work across other functions where we don't know information because we're going in with that curiosity and asking the questions. So I think part of it is like lean into who you are. Like we should stop telling people to just be the same. Like, you know, this is how a leader looks and acts.
Right. Google top 10 characteristics of a leader.
It's like you don't have to be that.
Yeah.
You can be yourself, lean into your strengths, lean into the things that make you you. I think the other thing is learning that, and I think a lot of us do it naturally, is learning how to speak the language of the other people. And not just like, you know, French to Spanish or something, but, you know, if I'm talking to a business person versus a tech person, I need to know enough to know what's relevant to them and what kind of verbiage do I need to talk about. Sometimes the miscommunication is you call it one thing, I call it another thing. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, we don't understand what's going on. But if I can come prepared, understanding how I need to speak to people to get my point across, you're going to get results faster. You're going to be able to build those relationships more effectively. And those are the things that are going to help you get where you need to go in your career.
Yeah. How long did it take you to learn that? Because that's a lot of adapting. That is a very specialized emotional intelligence skill. So for someone who's like, what do you mean I have to adapt to the, I mean, I think most people know that intuitively, but in real terms, how do you learn that?
I think part of it is it's trial and error, because it's one of those things you can read books and read books, listen to podcasts, get people's other insights and wisdom on how they're doing it. But part of it is you have to try it and learn what's working and what's not working. So part of it is kind of like this concept of like, you've probably heard about it, personal board of directors or personal, like, you know, your crew. Find people who will give you real and specific feedback about where you're going wrong. So sometimes it could be like, let me practice this thing that I need to go talk to my boss about with you.
Right.
If you find somebody who's maybe, you know, a step or two ahead of you who can say, oh, you might want to call it this, or they're going to ask about this. Getting that feedback and insight from somebody else who's been there can help you start to build that skill set faster. I think the other thing is especially with women and women of color, is leaning into that ability to honestly code switch. You've already been doing it your whole life, is like, this is professional me and this is me at home with the family, you know? But leaning into that skill, like if you can just apply exactly what that looks like into the business space. And some of it is just taking the little bit of time to be proactive, to learn enough about other people's worlds so that they feel cared for and heard. Literally. So it's like open. Podcast, like following people who are big in their spaces on LinkedIn, you know, reading different books. It doesn't have to be an all-consuming task. Often what I'll do is because I'm meeting with clients in different industries, I will binge like 2 or 3 podcasts before I have to meet with somebody if they're in an industry I have no experience in. So I know what they're looking for, what's relevant to them, and how to talk to them about what I do and how that aligns to what they're trying to do.
So brilliant. I love the tip to find someone just ahead of you or who's in that industry and be like, what does this look like? What am I saying wrong? Why did that totally bomb? Feedback can be so important. And they've actually done studies. I think Zenger Folkman has done studies that the older people get, the less they ask for feedback. But that's when we need feedback, right? Yeah. The ability to ask for feedback and then take it critically. Not as a criticism, but take it critically to improve.
Yeah, and finding the people who will give you meaningful feedback.
Meaningful,
Because you know how it is. Sometimes everyone's like, you're so great. And you're like, but I'm not. And I need you to be clear with me. Or they'll be like, that was terrible, but they can't tell you what was terrible. You need somebody who is like really good at the art that you're trying to master, who can say, here's the thing. It's your delivery, your pace, your tone.
Yeah.
All of the little nuance.
When you said it.
Yes.
And there is a lot of nuance. It's like when I learned that politics was a game, it kind of turned me off. I think we've talked about this a little bit. It kind of turned me off. But then I'm like, but if it's a game, you can understand the rules.
Yep.
Business is
just
them.
the same.
And business is just the same. It's learning all of those things. And it plays back to hopefully the people who are just a couple steps ahead of us want to give us real, meaningful feedback.
Yes. And that's why it's so important. Develop relationships from the beginning of your career all throughout. So that way you can start to find the people who are truly in it to support you because they want you to succeed versus the people who are doing it to maybe try to get something from you at some point. And like not everyone is like malicious intent out to get you, but some people like do fall into that.
Networking is.
Like if I give you, you better give me, and you're like, oh, I didn't sign up for this. And also like you want to get meaningful feedback. So sometimes if somebody is out to potentially like not give you the full picture of what's not working, you might be missing something or going and thinking you're prepared and finding you're still not.
Right. So good. So you work a lot in the tech space. And of course, we have a large growing population of tech companies here. What are tech companies getting right as far as leadership development and women in the pipeline? And what are some things that they could improve upon?
I think some of it is like, at least Utah, the Utah tech scene is so special. I love watching people go to bat for each other, to reach out and make connections for people, to try to help amplify other people's businesses. I love seeing that all day long. So I love the community that we're building here. I think there's an opportunity though, number one, for like companies from a strategic standpoint. I think part of it is looking at where you are in your phase of growth and understanding, is your leadership team the right team to take you to the next level? So the thing that I've noticed, especially in startups, is like you need a certain type of human to come in that early phase. You need somebody who is rise and grind. I eat success for breakfast. Like I'm willing to do all of the hours.
I'm on this.
Like I wear 18,000 hats because I don't care and I get it done. But then at a certain phase when you decide, okay, we're going to start scaling this or growing this, the leader who is like, I do it all and I take it on is not necessarily the one you need for that next phase to say, I need processes in place that are scalable and sustainable. I need leaders who can develop the next generation of leaders to make sure we have a talent pipeline. I need people who can navigate the chaos and make it like seamless for the people who are here because they can buffer them from some of the, ups and downs that they're naturally going through. So I think one of the things is like looking at your leadership team, and there's no shame in saying I am an early startup CEO or manager or whatever.
When you say that, I think people are going to like get stressed out. Some people will really get stressed out about that.
They will. And don't at me
That's just
because
how it
it's
is.
true. But the thing is like, that's part of the emotional intelligence and maturity of like, as you grow as a human being, you have to understand like, where do you play the best? Not everyone is the type of person that's drop me in the chaos and I can make sense of it and come out, with a process on the other side. Some people really just do well in the, I need an A, B, and C. I need to do it every time, but I will get you results without fail. But if you know that about yourself, you can self-select in, and you can also start to see, hey, we are starting into that next phase. It's time for me to plan an exit. Let me help work with you to find the next leader because I want the company to succeed. Like at some point, it's about you finding the next great thing for yourself, and it's not always going to be the same opportunity that you're in today.
Right. I love that you talked about strengths, not only individually, but where in the process is your strength. That's huge. Something that started to come up a lot that I think is interesting is succession planning. And how often women aren't even included in the, hey, who are we going to pull along to do this? So I love that you brought that on of what makes the company succeed, because maybe I'm going to step down because I got it up and running and now someone else can take over. And what a gracious, beautiful thing that is. And it comes to the idea of belonging and all these things that we love to talk about of there's room for all of us at the table.
Well, and also in our unique ecosystem too, is like, if you're that startup king or queen and you love that early stage, like hustle and grind and figure it out, when it's ready to go to the next phase, free yourself to go do that again somewhere
Yeah.
else. Like, let's keep doing some really great work. Let's solve bigger problems that the world is facing. Like, there are so many challenges that we could be tackling, but it's like if we just sit in our space because we're comfortable, is that necessarily the best thing for us? Maybe, maybe not.
I don't know. That's a big question. It's a good question, though, for companies to consider. I've loved our discussion. I could talk to you for hours. We could talk for hours about change management alone. But for our audience, the women and the men who listen to this, what piece of advice would you give to them as you've come into Utah, seen the culture here, worked in your job, worked with lots of people? What's a piece of advice that they could take away? A how-to or a tidbit or I've never thought about it that way.
I think for the leaders in our community, it's who are you missing at the table? Look around with you, look at your business and where you're trying to go, and whose voice isn't represented there. I think there's such a huge opportunity right now for businesses, big and small, to address, are you effectively supporting people with disabilities? Are you effectively supporting people, who are coming from refugee communities? Are you effectively supporting women in their needs? Like looking at your organization and saying, is there an opportunity to bring a new voice to the table? Because when you do that, you never know when that voice is going to be the one that's going to help you evolve into the next greater version of where you're going. So I think for companies, it's look around and see who else is missing and see how you can start to, like you said, build that succession planning, build your talent pipeline, figure out where those spaces are to provide that development for them. I think for individuals, it's start now. Start connecting with other people. Do not wait until you've been laid off and you need connections. Start building community now. Like to me, there's so much that's great about, remote work from home, but also there's that isolation in that space. Like find out who you need in your life, who can support you, and again, who can help you develop in these ways that you're looking to grow. And don't come in and just be like, hey, I need you to mentor me. Like slow your roll. Like learn,
what does that mean?
Like connect with people. Right. Connect with people, comment on their posts, share their posts, like the stuff, like do the things to start to build engagement and trust, and then say, hey, could I take you out for coffee? I'd love to pick your brain. And don't get discouraged. Some people are super busy. If they say no, it's okay. Find the next person. Talk to them. But I think building those really meaningful relationships and building community for yourself is so important. Like take the time to invest in yourself and know that you are more than just your job. You're more than the title you have today. You have inherent value as a human being here on this earth. And I just want people to understand, like you matter so much to the people around you that no matter where you are or what you're doing right now, like take care of yourself and build that community so they can help take care of you too.
Beautiful. I love the emphasis on community because I really believe we're better together. We have more in common than we do, separate. And then also the idea of there's no scarcity.
No.
So if we look to say who's not at the table, bringing them to the table doesn't take anything from anyone else. Right? Like we say all the time, no shame, no blame. Just change. Let's see what the future looks like. The vision of the future is, I think, what you just distilled for us in a really, really well-spoken way. So thank you, Heather. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It was fun.